Welcome to YogiViews, where my guest is yoga itself, through interviewing those who practice it, teach it, sell it, or simply love it. I am Antonio Sausis. Yoga has been practiced for thousands of years. And even though all forms of yoga address the integration of all existing things, we know there are certain types or branches of yoga that address this integration from a different standpoint. For example, one of the very well-known ones is Hatha Yoga, or the yoga of the body, that addresses the integration through the practice of asanas, the very well-known yoga poses. Whereas, for example, Bhakti Yoga, or devotional yoga, addresses the unity through developing within an unconditional love towards all existing things. In recent years, we've witnessed the emergence, the appearance of a growing number of styles in yoga that differ from one another in such details as whether to stay in a pose for a long time or a short time, whether to care or not about alignment when practicing a posture, or, for example, how to flow from one posture to another. Examples of these styles of yoga are Iyengar Yoga, a style created by Mr. Iyengar and that deeply emphasizes alignment when practicing postures. Another style is Power Yoga, a style based on Ashtanga, a style created by Patabi Joyce and that emphasizes the building of strength and stamina through yoga practice. Another style is Integral Yoga, the style created by Swami Satchitananda, the guru that taught the crowds at Woodstock to sing Om back in the 60s. In more recent years, we've seen the appearance of a more modern style, Anusara Yoga, a style described as heart-oriented, spiritually inspiring, yet rooted or grounded in a deep awareness of inner and outer alignment, body alignment. With thousands of practitioners, and I would say hundreds of thousands of practitioners all over the world, and over 1,000 teachers, the Anusara family or community is a closely knitted community that exalts the goodness in all existing things and that can be epitomized by a celebration of the heart. I have the pleasure of having here with me today the creator of Anusara Yoga, John Friend. Welcome, John, to our show.
Antonio, thank you.
John is a widely recognized and respected charismatic Hatha Yoga teacher, a direct student of Mr. Iyengar and Patabi Joyce that blends the universal principles of alignment with a life-affirming tantric yoga philosophy and addresses, honors, and respects each and every one of his students with a great deal of compassion and love. He also holds a degree in accounting and finance and is the founder and CEO of Anusara Inc., the company that supports John teachings worldwide. John.
Antonio.
One of the most important things that most everyone wants to know is what was your personal road to yoga? How did yoga happen for you in your life?
Yeah, that is probably the most common question I get from anybody I meet when they just to connect with them about yoga. And I'm happy to say that my personal story is very interesting because it started very young. When I was just 4 years old, it was the day that President Kennedy got shot. And I literally had a very powerful experience that day that led me, believe it or not, even into meditation at an early age. And then when I was 8 years old, my mother read to me some stories about yogis that had supernatural powers. And as a young boy, that was just so exciting and really mind expanding. And even at that time, at 8 years old, I thought, you know, it would be cool to be a yogi. So when I was 13 years old, I began to formally study yoga through scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita, scriptures that are called the Upanishads. And I literally started to take classes in Hatha Yoga. So it was really early, and that was almost 40 years ago. And since then, I've studied all over the world, and I continue to be a student. So it's a very diverse and a very expanded story, my personal journey of yoga.
So your personal journey started more, you said, from a meditation place in
Yes.
yoga, because a lot of people start through asana or through different experiences. Yours was meditation.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because I now have been teaching for over 30 years, and when I ask students, why are you here? They will often tell me that they're starting yoga for more physical reasons, so they come in to learn the posture, to learn breathing, and it could be for relief of some pains in their body, or they come in for relief of some psychological stress. But they're more interested many times in just kind of getting a physical practice, a workout even, and they're not really necessarily or primarily interested in some sort of a deeper spiritual practice. And so, meditation is maybe not what they're first coming in for. So in general, most people do come, I think, for a physical reason, but it's interesting because as they get more into the practice, especially Anusara Yoga, the depth of their spiritual interest and their spiritual practice really grows. For me, it was always been a spiritual practice, and it started with meditation and then led into Hatha Yoga. But for many people, it's actually the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. And in fact, for some of us that appreciate the spirituality that yoga brings to the table, sometimes we regret that yoga is practiced with just physical intention. But it is true, and many other teachers and masters agree that then people get some of the rest.
Yeah.
And I know you to be a supporter of and a person that induces the spiritual aspects of yoga and the mindful aspects as well.
It's true.
And this is in your creation, Anusara Yoga. So I briefly opened a little bit with the styles, but I would like you to tell us, to define a little bit what Anusara Yoga is.
Okay, very good. And your little overview was actually very good.
Yeah, okay.
So it is interesting because we do have these schools or styles of Hatha Yoga today, and they do distinguish themselves in philosophy and in technique of the physical postures, and even how their communities interact and work together. So believe it or not, all yoga philosophies are not the same. And I think we start with this understanding because the Anusara philosophy, which is more tantric based, and I can talk about that in a little bit, is not necessarily the type of philosophy that some other Hatha Yoga schools might embrace, where some schools are based on what's considered a classical yoga philosophy, and in that case, there is a view that the physical body, the emotions and the mind, thoughts and imaginations, are actually considered to be inferior to spirit itself, to the presence of consciousness and the presence of one's mindfulness. And so in that practice, there is an attempt to try to control or to really discipline the mind and the body in order for the spirit to literally almost disconnect or separate itself from that physical embodiment in order to gain freedom from its pain and suffering. So all yoga does have the same intent ultimately for freedom from pain and suffering, and freedom to experience and to gain realization or awakening of one's divine essence. But the philosophy of how we actually look at ourselves does differ. Now, in a tantric point of view, that is the basis of Anusara Yoga, we see the mind and the body and the emotions as just a part of the spectrum of spirit itself. It's not considered inferior or less than spirit, for it is spirit. It's just vibrating at perhaps a slower or more dense level. And it is not, our intention is not to try to discipline it in a way to extract spirit, but perhaps discipline it in a way that it aligns with a bigger flow of energy, a bigger flow of spirit for a more natural awakening and realization to occur. And in so doing, there is freedom. There is the freedom from suffering, and there's freedom to be more creative and to add more beauty and love and joy into the world. That's considered a tantric philosophy. So there are Hatha Yoga schools that can focus on classical yoga. There are other schools that focus more on what's called a Vedanta or Advaita Vedanta perspective. And then there are others like Anusara that are tantric. And then there are technique differences. So every style has a lot of technique or methodology characteristics. And you mentioned like some styles will hold the poses longer, some styles flow and move more, some styles are very much more introspective and turning in and quiet, where some are very physical on the outside and you can really get a good sweat going and get a strong workout. So every style has these technical or methodological differences. And in Anusara Yoga, we focus on universal principles of alignment. In this, in every pose that you do, you can actually apply a set of principles in ways that you can create harmony and alignment for an opening of consciousness to occur in any pose. So instead of learning each pose and the little nuances of physical alignment, each one separately and distinctly, you can literally apply a set of principles to any pose in order for something positive to occur, both on a physical level where you have good health benefits, but most importantly for real spiritual openings to occur, insights, awakenings, an inner delight of the heart, where more love and compassion and sensitivity occur. And these literally occur by how you're practicing, by how you're aligning the body and the mind. So there's really a science to it. We start with the idea that there's an art aspect to it, the art of being creative and adding to the beauty and to the love of the world. That can be conceived as a tantric idea. And at the same time, that intent then is supported by the science of it. So Anusara Yoga then could be considered a scientific art of Hatha Yoga. And thirdly, it's not just the philosophy and then the technique, but it's also about how we work in community. And I think you said it very beautifully that it is a very loving community, a very tightly knit community that's worldwide. Right now we're in over 100 countries and all around the world really. And even in the Middle East we have Anusara Yoga, but most importantly it's just the interconnectedness to humanity everywhere. And so when I talk about community, for me, it's the whole world. And so Anusara Yoga is really a philosophy that is tantric in seeing that everything essentially is different aspects of one auspicious spirit, a creative spirit of goodness, and there are ways to align with that spirit for revelation to take place, and there are ways that we enjoy community connection for that revelation and for love to grow and for delight to grow. So in a nutshell, that's Anusara Yoga. That's our main differentiating aspects from other styles of Hatha Yoga.
Now, as we said before, I understand that Iyengar is big on alignment.
Yes.
But I think that you are speaking about a slightly different form of alignment, for it includes the other aspects of the being. Is that one of the differences?
I think if there's any difference on the philosophy, is that he does come from maybe a more classical point of view, and I'm looking at it in a much more tantric way. So there is some differences, but essentially the alignment, we're doing the alignment ultimately for the same reason, and that's for freedom.
Tell us a little bit more about Tantra, because not everybody knows about, and a lot of people have heard this term, and even some of those who have heard it have some kind of association with sex, because Tantra, in a way, has a lot of exploration and practice through sexual aspects of the being or technique. And I understand this is not what you use of Tantra, but yet you do base your work on Tantra. So
yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, when you ask most people on the street in America, you know, Tantra, or you even go to the internet and you just type in, you Google Tantra, you're going to get, I don't even know what it is now, you know, millions of sites that are probably going to be connected to some form of sexuality. And in general, sacred sexuality is sort of the general category that it's put under. But Tantra really is a philosophy that sees everything in life as integrated. For it takes a perspective that spirit and matter, if you will, the physical aspect of life, are not two separate things. It is really one cohesive spectrum of consciousness, supreme consciousness, energy. And, you know, it's just like Einstein's energy equals matter, in effect, is a tantric formula in a way, because it's saying that, yeah, you think that or we might think that it's just the physical body and the mind, but these are actually physical embodiments of this energy, this consciousness. So Tantra, the word Tantra can refer to a weaving, an interweaving, or an integration of a view of life that makes spirit, the spirit of life, pervasive in everything. And that the very essence of life is the spirit, which in the tantric view that I ascribe to is seen as auspicious or innately good, that it's vibrating with an ultimate freedom of creative power. It's unbounded, it's totally full, and that it is completely free in its power of its mindfulness and its power of creative expression. So Tantra is an interweaving of this spirit into everything in life. It doesn't see matter or the physical as something less than. So that's the big definition of Tantra. And it includes everything in life, and particularly in relationship. So, you know, when you think about in relationship and you talk to people about their relationship, the things that most people will bring to the fore is their love relationships, you know, their friendships. And what most people are very interested in is their most intimate relationships, which includes many times their sexual practices and their expression. And that's why sexuality is often included in Tantra. Now, some people put the sexual aspect to the forefront, but it's much more than sexuality. So it does include sacred sexuality, but it's much more than that.
Yes.
And that's a nutshell definition of Tantra.
I was puzzled by something I read. I believe it was either written by you, or at least it was on your website, and that is related to the fact that while Tantra addresses integration and the coexistence of opposite aspects of an actually one continuum.
Right.
For example, we could say the continuum of light,
Yes.
where full light is the full presence of light and darkness is just the absence of light,
Yes.
but not anything different from light.
Correct.
When you affirm, and you just did, that we are innately good,
Yes.
are you making then evil a mistake of human beings? Is it not part of human beings as well, such as darkness is part of the continuum of light?
Yeah, these are the great questions. And when we say, is it a mistake? Well, you know what? In some way, you can actually define it as, yeah, it is a mistake. Like when we make mistakes, when I make a mistake, oftentimes it could be just that I'm ignorant of something, or I'm not seeing clearly. Like you could be walking in your house in the dark and you trip. Say, I made a mistake. So evil, we don't say in Tantra that there is an intrinsic evil. It's not like the ground of being or spirit has any evil in it. But out of its own intrinsic freedom, it chooses to have different aspects of light and dark, so that one's ability to see the whole play of consciousness has limitation. So from a limited point of view, we make mistakes. We say things that hurt ourselves and others. We do things that create pain and suffering. And I don't really believe that at the heart of anyone or anything in life that we want to create pain and suffering. I think when any of us have ever acted in a more malicious way, which I would put as synonymous with evil, evil just being against life, that it is just from our own cloakings, our own a form of blindness, our own pain of our heart. And many times we do make a mistake. We just lash out sometimes. We're in our own suffering, and so we want to be free, and we don't know how to get out of that situation, and so we make unskillful choices. So mistake could be synonymous with that which is unskillful. Same thing.
But going back to the fact of whether bad is also an aspect of the human being.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you
well, you know,
believe
when we
that
say
it is?
when we are in this realm of relativity, meaning of space and time, where the unboundedness of spirit in the absolute form is cloaked or limited, then there's always going to be light and shadow. There's always going to be clarity and obscuration.
Yes.
There's going to be success, if you will, or alignment and misalignment.
Yes.
So when you say good or bad, there is good and bad, you know, and better way of saying it, because when we say bad, we often put a very, I think, negative connotation on it, and we put it, like we really move it over to the side. But if you changed it and you put skillful and unskillful, and you recognize that that's just part of our human experience.
Exactly.
We're going to make mistakes.
Yes.
And again, I don't believe that we innately want to do that, but it happens. So, yeah, I don't believe there's any bad or evil that's outside us that's working independently. I think it's just part of our experience.
Oh, perfect. Exactly. Yes. And this was a little bit of my point, because I definitely I'm interested in the ways yoga brings light over some very human issues. And you know, sometimes we really love someone, and if she's late enough times, I'm starting to not love her so much. And it's a common thing.
Exactly.
And it's part of it, and sometimes I might be as well bad, and our viewers as well, you know, they might know that. And perhaps being one with the shadow, being able to integrate this is important.
Very.
Just as for a hero is important to know his weaknesses.
Exactly.
Because this makes him a better hero.
Yeah, well stated.
So on the philosophical aspect, then, we now understand the influence of Tantra Yoga in Anusara. But now from a methodological standpoint, what is the methodology of Anusara?
Well, I purposely designed it for the 21st century and making it a global school or global style. And so that in any country that you go to, pretty much any culture that you can go into a Anusara yoga class, and you will find some consistent methodology. And what you'll find is, first of all, you're going to be welcomed into the yoga studio. No matter if you're an atheist, you're going to be welcomed. Thanks very much for coming. Because we're seeing everybody as an embodiment of this divine, no matter what they're thinking. Of course, we have ethical precepts. You know, you need to behave in the classroom, but to a certain extent. But in general, we honor everybody that comes in. So the method is very inclusive. We have children's classes. We have prenatal classes. We have classes for therapeutics, for people that all have all kinds of physical ailments and injuries such as lower back problems, hip problems, shoulders, etc. And we even have classes for our seniors, for even in retirement homes. One class that I was recently working with, the students are 90 and 100 years old. Okay, so it's a method that encompasses the full spectrum of pretty much any possible student you can imagine in the world. And therefore, the method then is not limited by a certain set of asanas. It's not tight to a certain sequence of asanas. Every class is completely adapted and modified for the audience that we're working with. So a children's class, even the young children, or can be different than a teenage class, or can be different than a class for athletes. But we use principles of our method that can then be applied to any audience. So it's a very full encompassing style, and I purposely designed it as such. We always start with the centering. So in any class in the world, there is a pausing to remind everybody that this practice that we're doing has a spiritual intention. And again, even if you have atheists in the classroom, or that we're teaching in a gym where everybody in general is there to work out and to build their outer form, we're still going to make a very formal statement that this is about expanding our spiritual awareness and expanding the best part of ourselves in terms of creativity and love and beauty. And within that, we do also set a theme for every class. And the theme is what I consider a heart-based theme, which means that there's some sort of a virtue of heart or mind that will be the key theme for that class. So it could be like a class that is on generosity, or a class on service. How can we go and aid those that are suffering, or how do we help bring even more joy to those that we love? Every class will have a virtue-based theme. And then every class will have a mix of asana that will embody those qualities within alignment instructions. And that flows for whatever the length of the class is, whether it's an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, or whatever. And then at the end, just as we began more formally with sitting and setting our intention, there is a time when we can sit for meditation again and or lie down and actually take a shavasana where we assimilate all of the energy that we created in the class, so then we can take it out into the world.
My next question is in regards to what you just said about looking for the goodness and the beauty, the inner beauty, and that is unique for each individual. And I, you and I perhaps understand about yoga. We love yoga. We practice it. Many of our viewers know yoga, love it. They would understand. But I also want to cater to perhaps a person who just lost his job.
Yeah.
And his wife left him, and he discovers that he has cancer.
Yeah.
And his money was gone with the Medoc mess.
Yeah.
What would you tell to a student? How are you going to bring his love and beauty inside? It's a challenging one, but how would you do this?
Yeah, it's a great question, because you think, Anusara is about love, it's about celebration of life, it's about joy. And people come in the classroom and you say, how you doing? And a lot of us are thinking, you know what, I'm scared, or I'm upset, or I'm really sad. Yeah. A lot of people actually come to class because they're not feeling happy.
Yes,
I mean, really, ultimately, some people say, hey, it's just a great day, I'm going to go practice yoga. But a lot of people are saying, I'm not feeling well, I want to be free, and let me see if I can feel better. So this is where the tantric philosophy of Anusara and really the whole method and the community do come into play in order to help bring a more clear view and vision, so that it can comfort someone's heart and comfort their mind. It put it into a different perspective that they can then completely open and be accepting or acknowledging of even their pains, to acknowledge their difficulties, to acknowledge their human experience, and to realize that this is it's not an easy thing, especially right now in this world, to live. So just the recognition that, hey, I'm in pain, okay? This is where we even start. And then there is offerings of the philosophy and the method of moving skillfully to deal with the challenges that arise in ways that can create a revelation to start to clear out a lot of the suffering. For we take the premise in our tantric philosophy that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And so the community members holding the same viewpoint are oftentimes there for each other, to remind each other of this viewpoint, to be there for emotional support, to have physical support, in every way that we can aid each other to help clear away the shadows that are blocking the love of the heart and the joy of the heart that is innate to our being, but is often not experienced. So community, as you brought up a minute ago, it is essential for that. It's like we literally work consciously in relationship to help each other awaken to the truth that we are innately free in the heart, that suffering is not the ground of life. Suffering definitely happens. It's going to happen. But, right, and yet that's not the very essence of life itself. Life has this innate joy, and yet that joy can be covered up, and a limited viewpoint, a confusion in our viewpoint can really add to the suffering. So there is skillful means, there is a skillful view that can help to guide us in a path back into the essence of the heart, where it is this ultimate freedom, this ultimate delight.
I see. And it's really important, John, because a lot of us, when we are experiencing suffering, we just don't want to. Yeah. And most of us, that's when defense mechanisms show up. Yeah. That's when a lot of habits, and most likely bad habits, come into place. Yeah. So perhaps this very simple fact of just acknowledging the suffering and then trying to move to a better part of the self and to base your perception of yourself on the goodness inside rather than on the circumstantial suffering or painful situation.